Thank you, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting on March 21st, 2023. We do have a need for a closed session. I'm willing to accept a motion to enter closed session.
I can make that motion. President Salazar, I move that the board go into a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing the character or professional competence or physical or mental health of an individual, discuss collective bargaining, and discussing the deployment of security personnel services, devices, or systems.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Vice President Williams and a second by Board Member Sweat. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote starting with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion passes, and we'll go ahead and move into closed session.
Thanks for coming, Keshley.
I don't have a good glare, I'm sorry.
Can I tell him you just said that? Oh, I want to tell him. Oh.
No, we're good.
All right. Welcome, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us. We have finished our closed executive session, and we appreciate the time that you've allowed us to hear what we need to discuss as a board. We're going to go ahead and move really quickly to a pledge, and I'll finish the welcome and other elements and the acknowledgments of our employee groups, because we do have a time certain at 6:15 for our school fees. So we will have Logan Hall, who will direct us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That takes us right into our time certain, 6:15, for a public comment period on the increase of student fees. Is there anybody here to speak to that publicly tonight?
My name is Gail Dawes. I work for the Salt Lake School District. I'm also a parent that started with working with elementary. Now I'm in the high school. Also a wisdom keeper from the community, my indigenous community. Also a great grandmother to our community because we advocate for one another. I originally came here from the reservation, and so our children really want to be involved. Our children are sacred and holy to us, and we want them to succeed in whatever they do, especially in the education sphere. The fees, I know, can be waived, but I have an example of my family member who came from a homeless situation. She has 5 boys. 2 are adopted through her husband, and they all love sports. So I'm thinking with the waiver, if they all started playing basketball, it would be substantial for them. And while she was homeless, she was on different like SNAP program, applied for housing and different services. And anytime she got a little raise, something would get cut off. She finally gave up on getting housing because of that. She got her GED. She's a boss now. She's supervising a grocery store. And her children are doing very good. The one is also Elper at West High School from a 7th grade, 8th grade. So I'm just thinking about the struggles that she'll have if she has all 5 boys at school with a fee And this is like $1,800 plus for the full 4 years. How much is that going to cost her? And with the high cost of living right now, it's really hard on a lot of our families. Those that struggles are like single parents, those that are homeless. And we want our children to be involved. We want them to socialize and feel like the rest of the student body and just blossom and succeed. So I just urge us to not demand so much, but I know that we all love our children and we can all help out some way. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Gail.
you.
Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else here to speak on student fee schedule? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that time certain element of our agenda. Just moving back to our opening items, just want to recognize our SLEA representation tonight. We have President Tobler, we have Vice President Mike Harmon. We also have Chelsea Acosta here. Thank you for joining us. From SLASA, we want to just recognize President Janelle Rodriguez, who's watching from home. We have Brian Conley, who's here as well, and Kesley Green. Thank you for joining us tonight. From Transportation, just want to acknowledge President Cindy Davis, our SLEOPA President, Whitney Favre. Child Nutrition President is Tanya Slaughter, and our Buildings and Grounds is Elia Ocampo. So thank you so much for all that you do for all of the employees in the district and your representation. Moving along to our consent agenda, I'm going to look for a motion to approve the consent agenda or any discussion that might need to take place there.
President Salazar, I move that we accept items on the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Vice President Williams. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second from Mohammed. Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, starting with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Moving along to our discussion agenda. Item number 1 is the draft 2023-24 student fee schedule. Superintendent, would you like to start that for us?
I'm looking for Missy, but I don't see Missy. So we have the fee schedule. Board members, you'll remember the presentation that we saw at the last meeting. I don't think there have been changes to that presentation. Dr. Taylor says there have not been changes to that between that last meeting and this meeting, and so you have that before you as you did at the last meeting, and we've now had the 2 statutorily required hearings, and so now it's up to the board for discussion.
All right. Board members, is there any discussion relative to the fee schedule as presented in the draft form? Board Member Bay?
Do we have that? Is it up here? No? Oh, okay. Yeah, so I just have a 3 slideshows. Just want to show something about the fee.
Is it like a PowerPoint or what? Do you
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint.
Okay. So is this part of your comment period?
Yeah, it is part of my comment. It's just going to be a quick.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it can be displaying it. I can just like read what I have already or so.
Okay.
It just has some numbers and data to show, that increasing fees are only cause a harm and, more challenges to our communities.
Understood.
And, yeah.
I think just for the future, Mohammed, if you have something that you wanted to present
Right.
in a PowerPoint or to the board, just to let board leadership know so that the
Sounds
rest of
good.
the board members know what's going on.
Sounds good.
But if this is part of your
Yeah.
comment period, then.
It is just part of the comment period.
So,
Yeah, I
point of
apologize,
order,
so-
Please.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about what is
Yeah,
going on.
I do. It sounds like Board Member Bate has put together a PowerPoint that he would like to share as a part of his public comment in discussion towards this fee schedule discussion item?
So Mohammed, my comments are not reflective of what you would like to do. My comments are going to be more about process, because I think that if we're going to give the opportunity for board members to have a PowerPoint with their comments, that we're setting that precedent then. And if that's what we're going to do, then I think that that should be something that we all agree to, that that's what we're going to do. Because I'm just even looking back at when we had our conversation over the student achievement plan, and Brian had a lot of questions. If he would have put it into a PowerPoint and been able to go through it, it might have looked a little different.
Sure.
And so I'm wondering if that's what we're going to do, then going forward, then you've opened up that door to that precedent to allow board members to present a PowerPoint with their comments.
So my question is there anything, against the board policy that does not allow that to happen? Or is it not? Because to be honest with you, at this point, I'll just go ahead and give my comment and let the public know what's going on, because we need to talk more about this behind.
And I don't think that there is anything in policy personally.
It's fine.
It's just more of a process question. And so I'm fine with whatever the process is. I think you just let us know what it's going to be. If Mohammed wants to show this, then that's great. Then going forward, that would be.
It's all right. Let's just go ahead and move on.
Just for future reference,
Yeah.
Let us know, and maybe we can have the policy subcommittee look into what that process might look like. And I don't think that it'd be an objection to have it included with, the minutes and everything at the end.
Right.
Okay,
And
that's
for the
fine.
next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Thank
we'll
you,
just
Board
go
Member.
ahead and proceed, All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read, this is for me from my comment, Gailey just gave an amazing, tangible, real-life example of the challenges that our students and their families are dealing with. And especially for a mom with 5 kids. Now imagine for parents who have more kids, and especially if they have kids also with disabilities. And so we go ahead, yes, there is this idea of, yes, you can go and file for a waiver, but the reality is not everyone is gonna go and file for a waiver. There are some families who are making just right there, and they do not qualify for filing a waiver. And we live in a district where it's minority majority. So we know, like for, just let's look at it this way. So 22, 23, right now the total of students who are enrolled in these programs are, around 2,560. And we are still waiting on more students, for the spring enrollment to finish before we will know exactly the exact number. And out of that, from what the district has found, is that 11.6% of students of UHSAA participate in fee waiver, okay? So that's a lot of students. It's about like 307 or so students in there. And then, however, we do have also 29.6% that are actually, the students who are like in this program, 26% of them qualify for free meal. So these are just like some rough numbers that are given to us. So now, if we're looking at these numbers and we can see, that we do have a population that really can, benefit from us stepping on our brakes and just hold off a little bit. And if we look at our district, for example, the way it is divided, if we look just like at the median income of families, so we go between $25,000 to $43,000, that's like all over on the west side. And that's a lot of families out there. We have like areas where we have 20% of the population is actually depending on food stamps. That's on West Point. Jordan Meadow, 18% of the population there depends on food stamps. Poplar Grove, 20%. Glendale, 22%. People's Freeway, 33%. And Rosa Park, 13%. And then we move further east where we see a single digit.
That's
You know.
time.
Board Member Bate, I'd be willing to yield my time for your,
Thank
for you to
you.
finish.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so if we look at all of those numbers, this just shows us that people are struggling right now. We have people who, if you go to the grocery store, they used to spend $160 probably. And guess what now? Even if you look at the WIC groceries, and their prices have increased. And we've heard recently that there were issues with the food stamp, you know, and its continuation or maybe not. There is an extension, but for how long that's going to be happening? I really, really want to urge every board member here, if you are thinking about anything, just think of a parent who is, you know, working tirelessly to pay for their kids' living. And I know, yes, it is very little money we can waive. And if we can like actually not push that forward to increase these funds at least for 1 year, until families stand on their feet, until everything kind of like settles down. And we are not a corporation, we're a public entity. And a public entity is for people. Corporation is for profit. And we are not that way here. We understand, and I know we can find a way that we can like step back a little bit and figure something out. At least that'll give us a year to evaluate everything, because we owe it to these kids. And again, if we decided we're gonna increase the fee, then us as a board, we should take a responsibility next time. When we approve a certain sports that requires so much money, we need to be willing to actually upfront those money down and not give it to the public.
Thank you, Board Member Bate. Board Member Sweat.
Thank you, Mohammed.
You're welcome.
So I've been thinking a little bit about this. I mean, I intend to support the fee schedule. I think that my feelings about the high fees go a little bit deeper in the sense of maybe if I step back in time, you know, years ago, the phone company, Mountain Bell, used to be the monopoly, right? They had the monopoly on everything. And I think that a lot of the vendors that we're using in our schools have a monopoly, and they're charging us for outrageous amounts of money for uniforms, for cheer outfits, you know, whatever it might be, that adds to the cost that we see before us, you know, tonight. And I think that, you know, it's set up in a way that in some way, shape, or form, we need to figure out how to go back out to the free market, you know, and say, you know what, we're not always going to use this particular place, or maybe we need to put out an RFP, whatever it is, because it just seems to me like maybe that's happening. I don't know if that's actually what's happening right now, and it's just a limited amount of people that do that. But in some way, shape, or form, it just seems like the costs have gone skyrocketed for a cheer outfit, which I don't, you know, it's hard to understand that. So anyway, I just, I think there's many levels. As you said, Mohammed, what are the things that we can do to figure out, you know, the issue with fees? Because like I've said before, every single school year, the calls I get the most are about the checks that parents just wrote to the school when they registered their kids.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Board Member Anderson.
Yeah, I would just say that I think participating in fundraisers can be equally prohibitive. So if we make the fees with or without a waiver comparable to our neighbors, it will help kids compete in their chosen activities without constantly asking them to do additional fundraising. Because we can waive the fees, but we can't fill the gap without asking kids and families to do that necessarily. So that's something that I've noticed. Continued fundraising is something that makes families drop off in their participation for extracurricular activities. So I would say I would support the, you know, the new fee schedule, but direct the foundation to continue providing appropriate supports to participating families, which would be their role to make sure that some of the issues that, you know, Mohammed has raised can be mitigated by the foundation's work.
Board Member Anderson. Any other discussion to this item on the agenda? Vice President Williams.
Yeah, sorry, one second. I appreciate the comments that my colleagues here have shared, and I spent the last couple of weeks speaking with different district officials about fee waivers and the fees and things of that nature. And I do see the importance that fees play in our district. I think without some of these fees, and kind of Ashley, when you talked about fundraising, without some of these fees and these costs, it does prohibit opportunities for more deeply engaged learning experiences. However, hearing Gail speak and hearing Mohammed provide, Board Member Bade provide some of those statistics, a lot of the statistics you're sharing are about people in my community and the people that I represent. So I'm very mindful of that moving forward. One thing that Board Member Bade said as well is maybe taking a halt for a year. That's something I'm kind of mulling over in my head right now. But I don't know that we could do that in the long term. But knowing, kind of the financial state that we are in as a community and as a country, definitely something to think about.
Thank you, Vice President Williams. Any other discussion? Board Member Jensen?
I think Ashley has reflected what my thoughts were, well, and Christie as well.
Excellent. So we're in a spot now where we can follow our precedent of going straight to the action agenda, or we can go through our study reports that we have in our study session and revisit this in a little bit and let some of the information sink in. Is that good with everybody? Or unless you'd like to make a motion? Yes, please.
Make a motion that we move the fee schedule to the action agenda.
All right, we have a motion from Board Member Sweat to move the draft 2023-24 student fee schedule to the action agenda.
It's actually on the action agenda. Perhaps the motion is to move to the action agenda because it's already listed on the action agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't look at
Nope,
that.
you-
Yeah.
that's right.
So
Just to move to the action.
move to the action agenda.
Okay, so we have a revised motion from Board Member Sweat to move to the action agenda. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Second from Board Member Anderson. Any additional discussion?
If I may add one more thing, before we proceed. When I say a halt, it is actually a great time for us to be able to get a chance to work with our legislators, see what we can do as our district to help them have a robust bill to help waive student fees across Utah. We want to be those leaders in there. Now, I understand the part of like fundraise and so, but the sad reality is we are still going to see families. I mean, we just increased, just in October 4th, we voted on increasing those fees. And when we increased them, we still saw fundraising going on, because there are always something that needs some more money. That's just like the reality. Whether we move forward and we approve the fee or not, we are still going to see that. But I think we can be the leaders in the district where we actually can work with our legislators and the city leaders and see what can be done to actually help us lift up that burden. That's what I'm looking for, a long-term solution. And that halt or that period is just going to help us figure this out, get some more time to talk about it deeply and discuss it.
Thank you, Board Member Bade. Any additional discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call for a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Anderson.
I'm voting to
action, just to move to action.
oh, we're voting to move to action, or we're voting on it?
Move to
We are
Move to
on.
action.
We're on action? Okay, Ashley Anderson, yes.
Those are yes.
Mohammed, yes. We'll move on to actions.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christie Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Excellent. That motion carries. We are now going to be in a discussion phase of the action agenda, back to the student fee schedule. Is there any additional discussion or maybe even questions for Business Administrator Kearsley tonight about, I'm hearing a lot about gaps, what it would take, and maybe I'll ask the question. I'll kick it off, Alan. What kind of position are we in if we put a halt to this, if we try to develop a robust partnership with the legislature. I know they go out every year to talk about fees and fee schedules and what that costs, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
You're fine. So just note, we have to approve a fee schedule by April 1st per state law. Whether that fee schedule is the one we currently have with no increases or the proposed one. So we need to approve a fee schedule tonight, whatever that might look like. Just note, a lot of these fees we're talking about are related to travel. You know, our groups are traveling to Southern California and enjoying all the activities that are available in Southern California, which adds to the cost. And if you look at our cheerleader uniforms, it's not just one uniform. There's a home uniform, and a away uniform, and a practice uniform. So these are all choices that schools are making that are driving these fees. And again, these are maximum allowed fees, not that they have to be charged. So just to know, if all schools charged all the fees to the maximum, the increase, we're looking in the $300,000 range that the increase would bring in. So if we chose not to adopt those increases, then either the schools or the districts district will have to pick that difference up because the costs are going up as inflation's going up, or activities will need to be pared back to live within the fees. So does that answer your question? Would you like me to wax more eloquent?
I have Director of Policy and Legal Services, Christina Kindle, raising her hand. Did you have something you wanted to weigh in on?
Regardless of what you do, you might want to think of a combined approach because the boys volleyball fees are entirely new. So if you were going to allow boys volleyball, you would either have to come back and do a new fee schedule at some point to allow that for the spring, or you would need to carve out an exception to allow that to move forward, right? So it might not be an all or nothing proposition.
Understood. Thank you. Board Member Sweat, and then
So
Board Member
I'm going to ask Alan on this also, because my recollection is that there was a bill about fees at the legislature this year. And there was a very big, robust conversation about it. And so, but the intent was, that they were not going to fund it. In some way, shape, or form, it was still going to have to come back onto the local district. Is that, do you remember it that way?
Right. So the discussion of fees at the legislature have largely been around curricular and co-curricular fees. We have three types of fees: curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular.
Right.
Whenever the legislature's talked about doing away with fees, it's been under the curricular and certain co-curricular fees. No, they haven't been addressing the extracurricular. Because again, if they're not paid by fees, then they're paid for by taxpayers.
That's right. So with the extracurricular fees that are included in this also, that what they end up doing is having a conversation around fundraising. And so how much more of barriers and challenges, and I think that we've done a really good job of looking at how we fundraise in Salt Lake District, but it's not perfect. And so I would just say, yes, I think we need to continue the conversation. I think it's important that we do that. And working with our legislators would be important, especially where, we have, as you said, Mohammed, a percentage, of our students, that I think you stated food stamps, right, as one of the indicators. So I would just hope that as we move forward in this, that we just continue the conversation. I think there's lots of different pieces to it.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that I think we could move this forward with specific direction for board leadership to talk to the foundation about the needs that Mohammed raised and about communicating them, because I wouldn't want students to not be able to participate in volleyball, which we heard the presentation on, or to lose a year of, comparable competition with their peers in the state while we can address these topics in other ways. So I would support that.
Any other discussion? Alan, was that a hand
So
raise?
I just do want to clarify. So any student that qualifies for free and reduced lunch automatically qualifies for fee waivers as well.
Yep.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'd look for a motion.
I move that we approve the draft 23-24 student fee schedule.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second that.
Second from Board Member Jensen. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote. With myself, Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, no.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, no.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
All right, that motion carries. And assuming with the motion that board leadership, Vice President Williams and I will engage in a discussion with James Yapias, Ed Foundation Board, and along with Superintendent about how we might address an agenda item at an upcoming select meeting. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Moving along to our study session, we have the virtual school instruction options. Superintendent.
Yes, this is a study session. We've got a couple of things on the agenda. Hope to have some good conversation as we move this forward. So, Logan, if you'd help us with the virtual school instruction options.
Absolutely. I've also brought my good friend, Miss Dr. Tiffany Hall, with me, because this is a broader conversation. I would have figured that out. Thank you, sir. I haven't even tried it yet. So, at the request of the board, we're back with an opportunity to provide some options. We were asked to look into what options might be possible for ongoing virtual learning. And so Dr. Hall and I have looked into multiple options, figuring out what's potential, what's possible here in the district. And before we even get started with that, I would like to provide some history of how we got to where we are. Of course, we all understand that we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, and at the beginning of the pandemic, families really were looking for additional elementary synchronous options that were live but not in person for a myriad of reasons. At the time, Salt Lake Virtual Elementary was created as a pilot school, but was given a school number, and it exists as its own school entity, and that can't be changed, or we can't do away with that as a school without the official school closure process, which you initiated a few board meetings ago. But there continues to be interest in an option for virtual learning that's not in person. That interest has declined significantly. Toward the beginning of the existence of Salt Lake Virtual Elementary, there were over 250 students. As of last week, there were 87. And we're projected to go down from there, but their enrollment changes drastically as students enroll and withdraw, depending on a myriad of factors. And so that's what's gotten us here, and I want to turn it over to Dr. Hall to talk about what virtual instruction looks like.
Sure, and one of the things that we keep considering as we look at this projection and we think about what that is that we always want to make sure that we have high-quality, core-aligned, grade-level instruction. That happens in all of our schools and all of our classrooms, and being synchronous or asynchronous would not be an exception to that. We also want to make sure that students are able to receive high-quality feedback and high-quality interventions. We know that students learn best when they're receiving feedback from a teacher that helps them see what they're learning and where they learn what they need to learn next, and also, especially with reading in our younger grades, making sure that we're intervening when necessary to pull students onto grade level and make sure that they're successful. All of our learning experiences, as I've said, these are things that we don't just focus on in virtual. This is what we focus on in every classroom and every school in our district. We know some of the challenges are making sure that we're providing the things that our parents want in a virtual learning experience, which is flexibility in schedule and locations for learning. And we also, have to think about how that happens when students are learning online, and whether or not it's a sustainable experience. How do we create a quality, sustainable experience when we're looking at smaller numbers of students? We've had several conversations about the right size for a high school, or the right size for a middle school, or the right size for an elementary school, in terms of the types of offerings and instruction and feedback that we can provide to all students. So those are considerations for you as a board when we discuss this as well instructionally.
So to add to that, I want to clarify our current staffing at Salt Lake Virtual Elementary. We currently have an administrator, an administrative secretary, at least one teacher per grade, and currently we have 8. There's additional support staff. And so with the current allocations, that's not feasible with the next year projections. Based on the student enrollment projections for next year, with our funding allocations, we would allocate 1.5 FTE, 1.5 teachers to be able to run the school with the number of enrollment that they currently have. So it's not necessarily a viable option to keep as is, but that nonetheless, I was asked to present options. Option number 1 is to maintain Salt Lake Virtual Elementary as a school. In order to do so, that would require us to maintain an administrator, office support, and like I said, 1.5 teachers based on enrollment. That'd be very difficult to offer instruction for 7 different grades with only 1.5 teachers. And so what that would mean is that the board would have to look at providing a significant additional investment to maintain Salt Lake Virtual Elementary as an ongoing school option. Just between the administrator and the additional office support, we're looking in excess of $200,000 just in those costs alone, not to mention what it would take to add additional teaching FTE to be able to spread the load of what the teaching needs would be for the school. So option number 2 would be to create a program that's already within an existing school. Salt Lake Virtual Elementary currently exists at both Parkview and Newman Elementaries because there's space in those schools. And so option 2 is really just a potential to say, if we look at this in a different way, we could create a program within one of our schools, much like we have specialized programs in several schools. So a virtual program, and we do have a virtual middle school program currently at Clayton Middle School that's being implemented in a similar way, where it's a program within the school itself. And in order to do that, we could do it in one of 2 ways. We would need to have 0.5 FTE of a teacher added to the school's allotment so that we could have 2 teachers. And I could envision this in 2 different ways, where we have one teacher teach grades 1 through 3 or K through 2, and the second teacher would teach grades 4 through 6 or 3 through 6, depending on how we configure that, whether or not we would continue to invite kindergarten students into the program. But we often note that kindergarten virtual elementary, just doing that with a kindergartner is very parent intensive. And so it's a different situation when you have a student who's just entering school for the very first time in kindergarten. It takes a lot of parental involvement I just don't know how else to say it. Just the parents have to be there to really say, oh no, here's what you need to do, and be able to guide their student along until they're a little bit older, and we see that more successful in first grade. So that would be option 1, maintaining Salt Lake Virtual as a school as it is, and option 2, creating a program within an existing school. Any questions before I move on to option 3? Ashley?
Yeah, about option 2, have the virtual elementary faculty been asked about that option or expressed interest in teaching a class like that was combined?
I've not asked them specifically about teaching a split class, so grades 1 through 3. I have not had that conversation with them. It is important to note that I don't know what the board is going to decide in June, whether or not which decision to make or what decision will be made. And so I've been working with the staff both to make sure that they are secure in finding positions for next year in the event the school does not exist in its current format, and make it very clear that if the school does continue, that we would make sure that the career status teachers, that they would have an option of being able to maintain their position at Salt Lake Virtual. So the teachers, we're working really hard to make sure that the teachers are taken care of to the best of our extent.
Thank you.
So with that, option number 3 that we found is Utah Online School. And this is sponsored by Washington County School District. It's housed out of Washington County down south, but it's available to any student in the state of Utah. The Utah Online School, it's completely asynchronous, and with that, I can't read my notes, but the,
Seven.
it'll be all right. They do have multiple offerings. They have a very large and robust faculty and support network. As you can see, I think they have over 150 teachers who they have pictured in their, that's just their online open page, but they have they have a large number of students, a large number of teachers that are available to provide support. And I think Dr. Hall could add to what that might look like.
Sure, thank you. We looked into the instructional piece of this. This program is a completely asynchronous program. So students never have a live teacher in front of them as part of that experience, but they do have a very thoughtfully laid out curriculum. It is about 70% print and about 30% online. They do indicate that parents are expected to support that student learning. They can support students who are in special education. In addition to kind of our standard, reading, English language arts, math, history, science, they have some additional classes like art, coding, sign language, keyboarding. They do some world language support with Rosetta Stone. So parents can choose to add one of these additional classes as their students go along with kind of the core classes that they would be taking. They will loan students a computer if a computer is needed, so that is not a cost. So this ends up being a zero-cost program to parents, although that is a loan, and all materials are mailed to them. So there is no need for them to drive down to St. George to pick up the packets every quarter or anything like that. Everything comes in the mail once students have registered. Students do follow the Washington School District academic calendar. So they would be a couple weeks off from, for instance, if a parent had a student in this school and our district, then their calendars would be slightly off, about a week.
And option 4 is the Rocky Peak Virtual Elementary that's in conjunction with Jordan School District. Tiffany and I had the great pleasure of going to visit with Principal Minlove there just this last week, and they have quite a robust program where they both have synchronous and asynchronous options, and some other neat in-person opportunities for students that we haven't seen anywhere else. And Tiffany, would you explain more about that?
They they have built out a schedule with 180 days of core lessons. They are using, they spend a considerable amount of time with reading intervention. That's built into their program. So as students are reading or meeting with teachers, they're also looking at that reading piece and inviting them in. They attend class synchronously in the morning from 8:30 to 12:30, and then they'll do interventions and other pieces in the afternoon. All of these are at single grade level classes. So, kindergartners are all together, first graders are all together. And so they're able to bring that across. And he shared some reading data that was very impressive around how they were able to work with students online. Again, as with any online program, parents are expected and needed to help and support that. That is a difference between a synchronous and an asynchronous program. If parents wanted to do that work in the evening with students, then that's an asynchronous program. If they are available to be there during the day and help that process in the morning, then a synchronous program might be the option for them. As with the Utah Online program, the Jordan District will check all students out a Chromebook, and all materials or other pieces are mailed to them. So there is no need for parents to drive to the Jordan District for anything unless they choose to participate in the live activities. And so they have 2 days a week opportunities for students to participate in STEM, craft activities, coding activities. When Mr. Hall and I were there was one group that was doing a watercolor. Was it watercolor or pastels? Pastels. Sorry, don't tell Mr. Eskelson I didn't know that. But they were pastels. And then as we went and talked to Mr. Minlove in his office, and as we came back out, they had changed and the groups had flipped, and another group was doing a Lego challenge, with different small groups. And that's one of the ways that they build in some social aspects to that. They also include parent nights. Again, all of this voluntary. So if parents choose to participate, they can come down, but they will also meet with parents online if that is not an option.
So those were the most viable options that we were able to identify, and just want to see what questions you may have for us and what you would maybe want us to bring back at a later time.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Dr. Hall. Superintendent, is there anything you wanted to add to the discussion?
No, just thanks for the research that these two have done, and I think our thought would be we discuss these different options now, what that means, and then we would look to you to ask us to bring back for discussion or for action at a future date an option or more information about two options, and then we can decide which one we want to move forward. Again, there continues to be some interest among parents in our district for an online elementary option, and so these are 4 different ways that could be provided, and we are looking to the board for your direction on what we might bring back.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'll open it up for discussion. Board Member Anderson.
I have a question about option 3 and option 4. The same way we're seeing reduced enrollment in the virtual elementary, are Jordan School District and Washington County's options considered more or less sustainable? I'm guessing the asynchronous option would be sustainable to the extent anyone could enroll, but specifically Jordan District, like, do they have sustainable enrollment?
That's a great question. I don't know about the enrollment specifically about the Utah Online School, but when we talked to Principal Minlove at Rocky Peak, he had also noticed a dramatic decrease in their enrollment, but their numbers are much bigger than ours, and it provides to a more sustainable ongoing future for their program because of the size of the district in comparison to ours.
Yeah, they had several hundred. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the proportion was kind of the same, but they had several hundred when they began, and now they're down at about 300. So sort of where we started.
Any additional questions, board members?
Well, yes. Do we have a sense from families or faculty at the virtual elementary if it is a synchronous option that's really preferred by our students? I have the sense that it being synchronous was one of the reasons people participated and continue to. Do you have that sense?
I think that again, and it's really 2 different pieces. So parents who may have for instance, here's my anecdotal data, right? Parents who might have children in daycare or staying someplace during the day while they're working like the asynchronous because they can do that at their own pace, they can do it in the evenings, they can do it at home. But parents who want that in-class experience or that sense of instruction being driven by a teacher with a classroom, that electronic classroom, and the kids see each other and they interact together through that piece, then yes, that is what they want for Zoom. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm sorry, they want a synchronous option that they would use Zoom. Yes, thank you.
Board Member Jensen.
With the Washington program, is that just K through 6 or is it K through 12?
It's K through 12.
Yeah, because as I was looking at that, it looked like with that amount of, so that would be something that the student could continue on after elementary school. The other options that we have looked at are just elementary school, is that?
That's actually not true. Rocky Peak has a sister middle school and high school as well. So they have a matriculation program where the students would go through middle school and high school in a virtual setting as well.
Right. But we also, if for instance, a student wanted to return to our district, at this point, we have a middle school option. We'll see how that pans out. But we do have opportunities for students to take classes asynchronously through high school if they chose to do that. So the synchronous option, K-12, would be the Jordan District option because they do have synchronous K-12. But for asynchronous, we can take that over in high school if needed.
We can do that. Okay.
Student Board Member May, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, like, anecdotally, I've taken classes through Utah Online School, like, as a high schooler, so that option exists.
Thank you, Board Member. Student Board Member May. Board Member Bate?
Yeah, I got some questions. So option 2, does that cost us money still? And how much will that cost us?
There would be an additional cost there because we would have to fund at least an additional 0.5 FTE of a teacher. So
Okay.
that's a significant cost.
How much is that we're looking at?
50,000.
Yeah, probably about 50. Yeah.
About $50,000 to $60,000. Okay. And this school, let me see here. So I'm just trying to, because right now, everyone, we all feel good, you know. Is this wood? No, we're screwed. COVID, we say, is behind us, you know, but we never know what else could come. And the issue that I'm thinking about is reinventing the wheel. If, God forbid, if something is to happen, and we've already put in so much resources, and I think we were going in some good direction. And I'm just trying, I'm really, you know, torn here because, one, our district's population is, I mean, student enrollment is decreasing. And if we go for another program in another district, those are students we're going to take out of our district. Is that correct? Yeah.
That would be correct, yes.
Yeah. And so I'm just trying to understand the process. So those are the students we're going to lose. So that's, you know, less money to the district in the long run. Maybe it's not as much as it's going to cost us to have a 0.5 FTE. But then if COVID, you know, its cousin comes back and, you know, we get hit, and guess what? It's going to cost us probably even more to reinvent the wheel again. So I'm trying to figure out, am I seeing this, you see what I'm saying? I like to assume the worst to prepare for, you know. Yeah, so help me, convince me out here.
So if I could just comment on two of those things.
Please, yeah.
The first thing is, with option 1 and 2, we are looking at combined classrooms, and I believe that was a question that Board Member Anderson was raising. And that is difficult to teach. So, you know, when we think about this, and so you kind of have a front and a second, a first and a second to your question. So the first is, yes, we would still maintain that sense of, you know, here is a classroom, and again, in which 2 or 3 grades may be taught depending on enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a difficult thing to do and to do
Absolutely.
effectively and well. And we know that. Any teacher who's taught a split classroom
Right.
knows that can be difficult. But the second thing that has changed since COVID, and again, you know, wherever the real wood is in the room, that never happens again, is that since that time, we have moved forward with Mr. Quantz and with our digital learning team, with our one-to-one initiatives. And so our schools and our students are getting much more facility in working with technology. So again, as you said, God forbid something like this happens again, and if we went out in a larger piece like this, then unlike when we started COVID the first time, when we said, you know, my goodness, do we even do all of our teachers have a laptop at home? Like,
Right.
because some of them were desktops. Now, I think we could say that we would be able to make plans that looked very different and would be, I'm not going to say easier, because it isn't easy to teach online, and it's not easy to switch,
Yeah.
you know, from live to online like that. But we do have some things that have been prepared. We have teachers with more experience, and we have the technology and more time. You know, a big problem with COVID was working with kindergarten, first, second graders. You know, as Mr. Hall said, that's very difficult for a kindergartner to get in, log on the computer. Well, now they've been doing that, and so in first grade, second grade, third grade, those things become a little bit easier. So
Okay.
if it's that idea of how do we prepare for the worst, Dr. Taylor and I talk about that on, you know, a regular basis. What do we do if there's a snow day? How do we make sure, you know, parents are ready for emergency learning? How do we make sure teachers and students are ready for emergency learning?
Okay.
And in the back of our mind is always what happens, you know, if that happens. And I think that's where our one-to-one initiative comes into play.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. That's great.
Thank you, Board Member. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Student Board Member May?
Do you have any thoughts on how the enrollment levels, if you did switch to the option 2 teachers, might change, or if the FTE discrepancy between actual and allocated might further increase?
Makes sense. I don't know what would happen necessarily making a switch to the split grades in that way. Our current projections put us at the 1.5 FTE, and so having to put in that additional investment, that would be the bare minimum. If enrollment changed drastically to the positive that we would need additional teachers, we would look at that at the very beginning of October and make adjustments as we do with all of our schools. So October, we base our enrollment, it's not the projections, but we look at our October 1 enrollment numbers to make any adjustments to our staffing. And so we would do that for that program as well.
Board Member Jensen.
With option 2, you had Parkview and Newman Elementary. Are you thinking that if you used option 2, that it would then move to one school, or are they going to be still, I mean, because you're really consolidating, it seems like. Is Parkview or Newman able to handle like the entire program space-wise, and or would you have to find somewhere else?
I think either of the schools would be able to handle the size, because it would just be the 2 teachers as a new program. That obviously has not made, that decision hasn't been made, but I think either school at least could fit the program within their current.
Meet the needs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would make sense to have them together so they can lean on each other.
Yeah.
It does to me, but I just was thinking practicality-wise, the classrooms and, you know, are they available? And
Board Member Sweat, did you have anything you want? Board Member Williams? Okay, so just kind of bringing us back to, you know, kind of the direction that we need to give. I know it'd be really helpful for the superintendent and for Logan and Mr. Hall, excuse me, Dr. Hall.
Actually, that's how I make my head.
Okay.
But I'm not married to this circle, so.
Sure, separate tables.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be really helpful to all parties involved if we could, you know, kind of give some direction about what options we want to learn more about and potentially make some decisions around in upcoming board meetings. Board Member Anderson?
I think the decision between the options can also, or preferences on the options at some point should be driven to the families who are participating. Like, I would be more curious to learn, do families prefer to stay in the district so they can transition in and out? Or do they prefer just to have a dedicated online option that is more sustainable outside of the district? And I think I could opine on that, but at some point we need a mechanism to ask the families about their preference.
Are you suggesting that we survey some parents who are involved in Salt Lake Virtual Elementary and?
If that is, you know, a logical next step from an administrative standpoint.
well, if you're going to do that survey, then it would also seem that it would be helpful to survey teachers to see if there are, I don't know if we had an answer as to whether there were teachers that felt like they could teach first, second, and third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I mean, you alluded to how challenging, I mean, that is,
It's a lot.
that is a big ask.
And it could change the daily schedule. You know, we'd have to see what that looked like.
Student Board Member, did you have your hand up or you just?
Oh, no.
Okay. Any other thoughts on direction we could give? I'm hearing some surveys, and that might help the board, you know, come to some greater conclusions about how we want to move forward. I think that's good direction, Superintendent. Is there
Part of what I heard, let me make sure, Board Member Anderson, that I heard it right. The part of the question is, do you want to stay in-house, or do you want to a parent, would you want to maintain your affiliation, as it were, with Salt Lake City School District, or is that not the important thing? Because options 1 and 2 really are the in-house options, and options 3 and 4 are the, not outhouse, but they're the non-in-house. the you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
And I I think I hear that.
Yeah.
That, and so really part of the question for us is, do you want us to explore further refine an in-house option and to look closely as well at what an outside option might look like? I'm hearing
Like
that.
because what it would find, for instance, is that if most families are not interested in an option like option 2, which we would find more sustainable and feasible, then creating it may not have the return that we had hoped for, which is keeping those students as part of the district. So we should look toward, directing them to the best available options. So figuring out, are they interested in this solution, for continuing virtual education in Salt Lake?
And right along with that, I don't know what the current numbers are, but when we talked about this earlier in the year, it seemed like a quarter to a third of the current enrollment are not Salt Lake City School District residents as it is.
Right.
So in that discussion right there, we're getting to the question of if option 2 was the one that was available in Salt Lake City School District, would you prefer the other option over the option 2? Do you see what my question is? Because if they're thinking, well, I want to stay in district, but I would like to have it be option 1, but if it isn't option 1 and it is option 2, that may change their feelings. They may then be more interested in one of the other options.
I think everybody's favorite option is the 1-to-9 student teacher ratio.
Yeah, I think
that's option 1 is going to be, that's the
that's
teacher's preferred, that's the student, the family's preferred. And that's where the sustainability question comes in, and let alone equity and fairness, things like that. But so option 2 makes sustainable sense to the administration as we've talked about that going forward, if we want to keep it in-house. Or the district's program could be, when somebody says, what's Salt Lake City School District's option for a parent who wants this situation? We'd say, well, let us give you the number for Dr. Menlove, and call him, and he'll enroll you, and you can do it synchronous. Or if we're comfortable with that those would be those I think seem to me to be the two best options: a sustainable in-house, or I mean, I guess we could pursue a conversation with the Jordan School District and Rocky Peak to what degree we might be able to partner with them, which would keep it in-house and yet leverage the critical mass of students that they have that we don't have. So that could be something we could explore further as well.
Okay.
So I'm hearing a lot. Let me see if I can bring us back again. It sounds like there's value to kind of survey teachers and parents about these options: in-house, asynchronous, synchronous, so on and so on. Teachers as well, capacity levels, right? It's a big ask, but also kind of narrowing this down to 2 specific options, or do we just want to know more about all of these?
I think narrowing it down to, in or out
Okay.
is the most critical question, and then we can evaluate what in looks like or what out looks like together.
All right, that works for me. Any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, and if we are doing a survey or so to the parents, let's make sure that they have a link to this spreadsheet here so that they can see the option of out and what it provides. So it'll help them, make it concrete.
Okay. All right, does that work for everybody? Alan, is there anything that you want to add to relative to sustainability from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, I think, we always like to keep kids in our district, but if we're spending, 5 to 10 times the amount of the WPU to educate that child on their preferred method, that's where sustainability comes in. So I think really, you hate to say it's about the money, but that's why you hired me, because for me it's about the money. So clearly that needs to be a heavy part of the conversation.
President Salazar, may I ask a clarifying
Yes,
question?
please.
So we're talking about in and out. Are we also wanting to talk about, to Board Member Anderson's question, synchronous versus asynchronous?
I think so,
I would.
yes. All right. Does that give you clear enough direction to come back for a future board meeting?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. Up next on our study session is item number 2, fiscal and population viability of a 4th comprehensive high school. Superintendent, I'll kick it off to you and Mr. Schulte.
Thank you. You asked us a few board meetings ago, and in the course of other conversations, said, would you please go look at, and that's really what you asked us to look at, the fiscal and population viability of a 4th comprehensive high school. And Paul and some of his folks have spent quite a bit of time putting this together. So, Paul, please.
Sure. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and see if I can look at that. Just want to remind you, I think when we were talking about middle schools and elementaries and some of the pre-work that we did relative to their repurposing and consolidation work, during those conversations we talked about model schools and what it looks like. And so I think it's very important for the foundation of this dialogue to kind of review those a little bit. So one of the biggest things we want to do is make sure we have a school that allows for student choice, to have the activities and the things that matter most to kids. And so the academics and extracurricular activities, which we spent a lot of time talking about tonight. Bullet 2, being an old high school principal, resonates with me significantly. The challenge of the offering as many different options for children academically, but being able to avoid those singletons. You get multiple singletons in it. It's challenging to put together a master schedule that meets the needs of students. So having a school that's large enough to, try to at least have 2 sections of most courses. It's not always possible, but when you have this next bullet, that 1,500 to 1,600 students, you can make a great master schedule and meet the needs of kids. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, those kind of the bullets that help us create a model school and an effective school. Now I want to be very careful here. We go over these slides with the whole cabinet, so lots of eyes look at this, but there's just a slight correction. No, I think okay. It's actually bolted. So this is, I went back and I looked at the last 5 years for the comprehensive high school. So Highland, East, and West, and what their populations were over the last 5 years. And so on average, we have just over 61, just under 6,200 students in those 3 schools. The 5-year average, you can see for each of the 3 comprehensive schools. And then we just did simple math. Now I want to be very clear as we look at that last bullet on the average, is we didn't do anything with boundaries. We just did very simple math. We just took the total and divided by 4. So we didn't dive into, what it would look like if we, to get to that 1543 and 4 quadrants or whatever. We didn't just do that work yet. We just went very superficial, kind of surfing along. Okay. So that's what based on what we've seen in the last 5 years, if you divide the students that attend the comprehensive schools, so the 3 comprehensive schools, that's what you would have. You could have 4 schools of 1,543. Then we looked, hang on here we go, and we said, okay, well, so what does it look like for if you took all the students that were high school aged in the district that participate in other programs. You can see those listed there, Horizonte, Innovation, SLCSD, and what does that look like? And so the total number of students that are high school aged over the last 5 years is just under 7,200. You see that first 2 bullets there, 7,182, and you can kind of see what the average is for Horizonte, Innovations, and SLCSD. So they all have, some are a little below 300, some are above 300, but that 300 number in those 3 different programs. So if we dropped all the kids that are high school age to 71 to 82 and divided that by 4, again, understanding that we're not looking at any boundaries yet, that gives you about just under 1,800 students in 4 schools, which is, if you go back to that earlier slide, both numbers kind of hit that sweet spot, which would be effective for a model school. Okay? So then we started looking to the future, and I reached out to the man who makes the district run, and it's not Alan or Dr. Bates, but it's Sam Quantz.
Hey, Sam.
And I talked to him a little bit about projections, and I wanted to just share with you kind of how projections work as we start to look at this. I said the projections, items like gentrifications are not considered, okay? But the projections look, if I mix this up, Sam, jump in. The projections look backward in time to predict the future based upon the historical enrollment trends. It's just simply a statistical measurement. And I want to say, I've been in the district for 19 years, and and Christy, you've been with me for the whole journey. I am absolutely amazed in how great and accurate our projections in the district are. I'm shocked sometimes. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect going forward, but my comfort level with the process and how I've always, I used to always think when I was hiring, they'd cheat me out of half an FTE, and sure enough, the next fall, they were there. And so these are some of the projections that we looked at. If we had, we went out 5 years, and if we took the students again that are just attending the comprehensive, so Highland, East, and West. And so you can see kind of there's a decrease there starting with the first year. Next year, we'd have an average of just over 1,500, 1,520. And 5 years out, that 2027, 28, we'd have an average of 1,453 from the comprehensive schools. Okay? So then we turn the page using kind of the way we did it earlier in the slide. And if we took all the students that were high school aged, this is kind of where it's going to go in the next 5 years. In 23-24, there's 7,195. So you have an average of just under 1,800 if there was 4 schools. And then going out to 27-28, 5 years out, we have 6,843 students, and so we have an average of 1,711. So you can see there's a decrease there if there was 4 schools taking all the students, all the high school age students in Salt Lake. So here are some of the things that you need to put together a high school. A campus. And I would say that this number, I cheated a little bit just in the spirit of clarity. It's a little bit smaller. So if I was down, so some of the schools that you've seen built in Jordan District or down in Alpine District, they have the luxury of lots of property. They just keep going west until they run out someday. We thought in Salt Lake, we probably don't have quite as much acreage available. So we thought we could definitely do a good high school, great high school, actually with 40 to 50 acres. But if you had to look at the model out, it'd be a little bit larger in some of those other districts. Looked at the what's out there cost-wise, and we figure about 50 to 70 million to purchase that type of real estate. Based on the presentation I did a few weeks ago, we kind of used a lot of the work that we didn't feel like we needed to go out and reinvent the wheel, so we took a lot of the same work that we did in estimating the cost. We figure about a 450,000 square foot building, 280 to 300 million, again, like we talked about with the feasibility. That's if you broke ground next year. And then you have, obviously, inflation. I want to just kind of take a little, just remind folks, because sometimes some of the feasibility discussions we did in this discussion, it's interesting. We think about the student size and classrooms, but there's just some things you just got to have for a high school, no matter if it's 1,000 kids or actually 2,500 kids. We need a football field. We need an auditorium. We need a great theater, cafeteria, these type of things. So it's kind of interesting. If you have 1,500 kids or you have 2,500 kids, the total size of the building doesn't change astronomically. And so that's why that 450 might seem like, well, maybe that's a little bit inflated, but it's about what you need to run a great school. So if you open up a new school, you have some costs that are going to be associated with the new school. So for instance, utilities. Now I will say that we did a lot of work. We have spent the last few years really diving into our utilities costs for our buildings in association with our sustainability work. This cost is substantially less than what West or Highland would cost, because West and Highland are not efficient right now. But we believe if we build a new school, just like we did in the feasibility, is that it'll have a great envelope, it'll be efficient, and so we think about $300,000 a year for utilities is a very, very honest number. Just the ongoing repairs and supplies, so that gets into books and papers, but also the repairs that my guys do all the time. That's about $200,000 a year. Custodial personnel, about $600,000 a year. You have a big staff when you do high schools. There's a lot of people that keep a high school running. Support personnel, so this is not teachers. We don't need any more teachers because the teachers will follow the students. Okay, so what you're talking about is administrative, clerical, these type of things, and it's about 1.2 million. And then extracurricular, you would have to increase because you'd have another whole allotment of coaches and things like that. So you'd need another head football coach, another head cheerleader advisor, those type of things, and that's about $350,000. And so it'd be, you can see there, just under 2.7 million to ongoing costs. Now there are savings when you consolidate and things like that, but I thought this would be appropriate for you to see this. Now I can go back. I got the clicker, so if there's questions, but you have the hard copy in front of you. But that was our little dive into some of the information and report we thought would be helpful for you to hear about an additional high school.
Thank you, Mr. Schulte. We appreciate you and your team putting this together. There's a lot in here. I know that a lot of the motivation, among board members and among the community is it's out there, right? And there's a significant push from a community-based perspective about equity relative to our comprehensive high schools, and the amount of time that it takes students to travel from west to east and back home east to west, accessibility to extracurricular activities, and the list just goes on and on and on relative to that. But there are other elements of operations and building and bonding and that also need to take place in this discussion. I'm also thinking about coupling this discussion with what we already know about the previous feasibility studies that we've heard from Mr. Schulte about regarding West and Highland. And while we've heard those discussions, we haven't necessarily given direction on what routes we want to take or how we want to approach those studies. And now we have added to the mix the discussion tonight. So I guess I would open up the discussion with that in mind. There's a lot to think about here. There's all the elements that I mentioned, but also the financial and the tax based elements that we would have to think about with bonding. Board Member Jensen.
So on the first page, you said that minimum enrollment was 1,500 to 1,600 students to have a successful high school experience. And so when you then go to the comprehensive high schools, we end up having 1,543. So we've got enough right now.
Correct.
But when you show those declines, then it starts to get problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why I'm trying to understand why we took innovations in SLCSD and Horizonte and put those students into the mix, because to me that's suggesting that you're saying, okay, we're not going to have those high schools anymore because we're going to take those students and put them in this mix. Is that what you're suggesting, or
that I was so powerful that could make something like that happen? That's not, and I appreciate your question, so it allows me to do some clarification. I think we provided that just for information for you. So if you were to build a fourth high school, you could look at high schools differently. You might be able to incorporate the SLCSD model with STEM and different type of things if you wanted to. You might be able to incorporate online models. When Innovations was started, goodness, it's been probably over 10 years ago. That was kind of very forward-thinking. Now with what you just talked about with virtual, that might be something you could incorporate into the school. So it's just purely information that here's all the high school age kids in the district. But it wasn't a recommendation to look at closing this or opening up that. It's just, here's another way of looking at the numbers.
Okay, I appreciate it.
You bet, thank you. I appreciate you letting me clarifying that.
Any other questions, Board Member Jensen? Mohammed, did you have your hand? Okay, Board Member Anderson.
So you answered a little bit some of my questions because you explained, there is no boundary, right? It's just everything divided by 4. And I think it's really hard to assess the feasibility of that because there's a lot of existing patterns where we know people already don't go to their boundary school, for instance. There's specific inter-neighborhood conflicts. There's also deep neighborhood pride. But the thing I worry about most is the impacts of gentrification. Like our latest demographic report showed gentrification was such a contributor to our enrollment decline. And the 9-line RDA that we are part of in an interlocal agreement hasn't reached its peak impact on our students. And that will impact primarily Glendale. So I guess I'm saying, what would be the next steps in terms of looking at not just dividing it by 4 for a layer of feasibility, but does this pattern actually make sense? Is there actually a sustainable boundary that gets to that size without the same issues of very long commutes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think if the board was to direct us, I think a next step that we could do, and I want to be very clear in the words I use right now, we could create hypothetical boundaries. I just would never want anyone to think that those were the boundaries.
Right.
So in the spirit of having more information, we could put together 2 or 3 different options of here are some boundaries that might work, but with the understanding, just like Brian did a great job of clarification, that no decision has been made. These aren't the boundaries that are good, because we all know how the water gets to the end of the road sometime, really muddy. But we could do that. I could work with Sam, and we could do some possible options that just would give you some more information, but with the understanding that they're not recommendations, they're not, this is what's going to happen.
Right, and if those also, Sam knew that those boundaries were taking into account the data from the demographic report. I'm sure that they are, right?
Yeah.
That's how he makes projections. But knowing really what decline is coming, because it feels like from a community perspective, if I'm looking in, I think we gentrified ourselves out of doing this, 1, through RDA investments, but 2, how can we assess the feasibility of adding when our elementary schools are all feeling the pressure of declining? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know what direction that gives, other than I think it's a confusing place to be in terms of feeling impacts from both ends.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Any other thoughts or discussion on this?
Might I just
Please.
Just to gently remind, this grew out of the, we're looking very closely at a piece of a much bigger puzzle. And the big puzzle that we looked at the earlier board meeting had to do with West and Highland and those feasibility studies. And so the question about community support for the rebuilding of those schools, let alone the building of 3 schools, those questions are still out there, and I've anticipated board members perhaps looking at me and saying, "So what's your recommendation?" And my recommendation is that we're prepared to do whatever the board would like us to do, which isn't necessarily helpful, but perhaps gathering some information about where the community support is in terms of. We do not have $600 million in the bank account to rebuild West and Highland. We do not have $900 million to rebuild West and Highland and a 3rd high school. The only way to do that, there is a way to do that, and that would be to ask the community for support to borrow the money to do that. And we've not asked the community those questions. That might be something that would be a next step in terms of both this small piece, but also the larger piece.
Thank you, Dr. Bates. And that's, as I've been thinking about all of these different options and different studies and, the community feedback, knowing what it takes to go out to bond and some of the trainings that we've had, just in my short 4 years on the board, it makes me wonder if, well, one, we still have the 2 feasibility studies relative to West and Highland. We now have this third one, and then the very important question of what do we do next. And I like the suggestion, I have it in my notes as well tonight, to suggest to the board that maybe we consider utilizing a firm like Y2 Analytics or Davis Demographics and going out like a lot of what happens in politics and in bonding and surveying the community, taxpayers, and just getting a sense from them about specific questions. Would the community support a $600 million bond? Would they support 2 high schools? Would they support 3 high schools, knowing that would probably around $900 million? What's the current level of trust that you have with the district or the school board? I think these are all things that have been on my mind that make me a little cautious, not necessarily about 3 high schools, but even 2, because that is a very significant ask. It would be a huge bond, probably the largest in history here in Salt Lake. And so these are just things that I'm thinking about, that maybe this additional information from our taxpayers through firms that we've worked with before or going out for RFP would be something that we should consider before we make a final decision on going to bond or 2 high schools versus 3 high schools and so on. So that would be my suggestion, Mr.
I just
Schultz.
had one point I didn't bring up, but I thought it'd be interesting to the board. Made a note to myself is that I used to be on the board of trustees and the executive committee for the Utah High School Activity Association. In the current realignment process, I designed, so that I know realignment probably may be as effective as anybody in the state. And so it's most likely if you were to go to 4 schools, everybody would be 4A. Just so you possibly know. And one of the other advantages, and this is really maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I'll be very quick, is that having been a board manager for a region, but have everybody in Granite and us be the only folks from Salt Lake, there's something to be said about controlling the region. And to have 4 schools around the same size and in a region decreases your out of class time, decreases your travel. There's lots of huge benefits that you would have, and I couldn't turn that hat off just because that's been so much of my experience over the last 20 years. So just a little bit of caveat there.
Thank you. Board Member Sweat.
So I think that I find myself in a quandary, and I don't know if the rest of you do or not, but I don't think that we've had a discussion of all of these things of how we're going to prioritize them. Because for me, I don't want to keep putting the cart before the horse. I mean, I feel like the decline in enrollment drives all of this. But if the rest of the board doesn't feel that way and we want to step in and say, no, let's talk about the bond, no, let's survey and find out about a 4th high school, whatever that is, then we just need to prioritize what we want to talk about first. And then that leads us to the next subject, to the next subject, to the next subject. And it might not be as quickly as some of the community that wants the 4th high school conversation to move forward. But I think that for me, I'm not feeling comfortable. I don't think that we have a priority right now. And for me, I appreciate all of the work that Paul's just done, but for me, that's just something we need to put into the hopper, that goes into the conversation. That's me. But I would just like to know, from the board, how are we going to prioritize these things? That helps us move forward in the discussion. So that's my question to you is, we need to prioritize. I think doing all of these things and having all these balls in the air is just going to make things worse.
I appreciate that. Any additional thoughts? Board Member Bade? Nothing? Okay. I appreciate it.
we need a school on the west side. Yeah, and I agree with Chrissy in terms of prioritizing, and I think, what you suggested, which is like, first knowing what the community, is looking for, and then once we know what the community, because we are here responding to the community, we make decisions based on what the community wants us, to do for them, and learning what the community wants, then bringing those information to us, and having a hypothetical boundary drawing, will give us an idea. So those are all like, bits and pieces of plan. So we just have to keep moving.
Yeah.
We gotta keep moving with it.
No, I appreciate that, Board Member Bade. Just hearing, thoughts on the board, and trying to look for a balance. And to your question, Board Member Sweat, I think our number one priority is hiring a new superintendent and getting that, done efficiently and done effectively, in coordination with a lot of balls that are still up in the air, as you point out. I also think that this is a really important topic, not just, 2 comprehensive high schools, but the potential of a third, is something that I believe a new superintendent should be a part of us with when we make that decision and how we prioritize these elements. Our time with Dr. Bates has gone by rather quickly, and it's going to end even sooner. So to me, that's our number one priority, and I'm wondering if we kind of just sit with this for a little bit. Let's get reestablished. There's plenty of opportunities to have these discussions, just knowing on what I do know about bonding, and some of the suggestions about when that should take place, ideally in presidential election years and so on, that maybe we sit with this information, get a new superintendent hired, and address this once that's taken place, and maybe even have a more in-depth conversation at, say, like a board retreat or at a board meeting when we've reestablished that position in our district. Not to minimize the importance or the significance of what the community is asking us, but if we're going to hire a new leader, one that ideally is sustainable for a number of years, they should definitely be a part of that process with us. Board Member Anderson.
Yeah, I actually think that starting to move toward contracting with an analytics group would help us prioritize. Okay. So instead of going through I could ask Paul 1,000 questions about the feasibility of this, but if the public won't support bonding for, what the public supports is also different than what is feasible for only the members of the public with kids who go to public school, right? So both of those things can exist simultaneously. These questions have been floated about how or whether this is feasible, but what the public will or will not do is still something worth asking, and then we have the answers when we have a new superintendent. That's my opinion. That in order to prioritize, we need to act, and I would say that the first step of acting is taking bonding really seriously, as we know it's a prerequisite for rebuilding any of our high schools, building a new high school, and taking any action on the comprehensive high school front. So I would alternatively go back to what you originally suggested, which is supporting moving forward with an analytics group that does this. And I would say for bonding specifically, working with a group makes more sense than doing it in the district, and I rarely think that. I think doing things in-house often makes more sense, but I would be supportive of taking that step so we can make better decisions.
Okay. Well, I think in the interest of time and just kind of where we're at, I think this is something that we should sit with and resonate with nonetheless. Knowing that it is a study session, of course we can give direction, but we can't ultimately make decisions. I think it would be good, if that is the spirit of the board, one, to sit with it. Let's think of some ways, both as a board and superintendent administratively, about some prioritization, next steps, what that might look like, and then I think we should revisit this at an upcoming meeting. That's just kind of the flavor that I'm at right now, just knowing that consensus isn't going to be reached tonight on how we move this forward, in particular, mostly because of the significance that this plays on our community, both in positive ways, and then, of course, on financial ways, because it's not just parents that would feel this increase in their taxes, and it would be the whole community that would feel that. So that's kind of where I'd like to leave it, if folks are okay with that, and let's revisit it. Get some time to think about all these different options. There's a lot on the table, and focus on some other elements that we have to tonight, if everybody's okay with that.
Why that noise is happening?
I don't know why that noise is happening. Okay. All right, rats. Okay.
Did you say it's rats?
Squirrels?
Stop.
Oh, boy. I hope not. All right, we have one last item on our agenda this evening, which is just a superintendent search. Just kind of discussion and really just approval of a couple of things. What you'll find in these yellow, yeah, Woody's got one.
I think you get a new one.
We get a new one.
You get a new one.
Okay.
You too, you're the proud owner.
You're gonna have a lot of yellow binders by the end of this. Feel free to recycle them back.
So keep the yellow ones for the superintendent.
That'd be
so
great.
that
Okay.
I'm color-coded.
So what you'll find in these folders are two letters. And these letters, I'd like to say they're final drafts based on everybody's feedback that reached out. Ideally, the first letter would go out tomorrow morning so that we can get communication established with the folks that we've asked to participate in this process with us as stakeholders and reviewers and rankers of the applications that we're getting for superintendent. The second letter that you'll find would go out once we have the candidate pool, so it would be at the end of this month, early April, just notifying folks that the process has started, and here's more information about that. And then the third thing that you will find in the folder is the original rubric that was provided by Richard Stoll and USBA, and then a second rubric based on board member feedback with some combinations and some red lines, so to speak, of things that were duplicative and things that we might want to consider. So I would love, at least just a thumbs up with the letters, and I'd love to get those out as soon as possible, at least that first one. And then we can spend a little more time on the rubric because we would like to get this process started, at the end of the month, in just 10 short days is what we're looking at. So,
Are you looking for us to formally support the letter, or just indicate that it's all
I think
good?
just an indication if folks are good with it. I tried to capture everybody's feedback. It's not word for word, but it's close. And
You've incorporated mine.
thank you. Excellent. And then the rubric is the other element. We would love to just get a support there so that that's ready for the reviewers on the stakeholder committee.
So are we moving on to the rubric? Have
Yeah.
we decided that, okay, and the letters, I know that I don't want to beat a dead horse,
Okay, it's okay.
but I really think these need to go out so
Yes.
that they know that.
Yeah, so the first letter I would like to send out tomorrow morning.
Great,
Yeah.
okay. So on the rubric, I would change that if there is insignificant information, I would say insufficient. To me, there's a difference between insignificant and insufficient.
And then
Okay.
the second one has other edits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have the original and then board members' feedback on the second one. And so just so I'm insufficient, right?
Yeah.
Talking about, right?
In
Right
the,
here where it says if
Oh,
there's
in the-
insignificant
okay.
I think it's more appropriate to have insufficient.
Insufficient.
okay. I'm sure we can make that change.
What?
Oh, just changing insignificant to insufficient.
Lydia has something.
On bullet points 4 through 7, is the idea that we just have them like circle yes or no being 6 or 3, or like would they circle NA if they don't have experience in those sections? Also, if that's like an objective thing, like are they experienced as a teacher, would we need to have each individual applicant review and assess points if it's just like an objective fact, whether or not they served?
That's a good question. Okay.
I think of the stakeholders, and there's quite a number of stakeholders. I'm pretty excited about that. But I think some of the stakeholders, as they are ranking candidates, some are going to think this is more important than others. So if we took it out, that wouldn't give them the opportunity to say, you know what, if they haven't been a teacher, I'm not going to rank them very high. They might have all these. You see what I'm saying with that, Lydia?
Yeah.
So having it there, I think, has value. It looks like it might be objective, and you could just check it off. But on the other hand, this gives individual stakeholders the opportunity to give value to these things as they see it.
Then I guess, and I don't know if anyone else has other thoughts. Like I feel like the yes or no 6 and 3 comment is kind of confusing.
I agree with you, Lydia. I wanted to know so if they're saying no, they give a 3, so what does 1 and 2 mean? Or, I mean, does that mean
absolutely
it's
not.
absolute, or I hate this, or?
Yeah.
To me, that was confusing.
Gotcha. Board Member Anderson, do you have anything on that as well?
No, I think it's good that a lot of things were removed, but of course I think that because I suggested some of them to be removed. So I do think some of them still don't make sense to me. Like if I'm a stakeholder and I'm reviewing written materials, I don't know how to tell if that person's a good listener. So I really do think the more we can reduce on this, the more accurate scores we would get from people who can really in earnest do the survey. But overall, I would, I'm not going to nitpick about that other than to say I think board leadership could take one more look, see if everything really is in fact consolidated to a good extent, make some, edits to the formatting and move forward with these questions.
Perfect. What I might suggest then is that, Bryce and I get in touch with Richard and just have a more detailed conversation about where we're at right now with this. Consolidate even more of what we can, ask some questions based on feedback from you all and Lydia. That would be helpful too. And then we get this out certainly before the 11th. Board Member Sweat.
So I'm sorry, I don't have the brochure in front of me that we sent out, for the superintendent, application. And so what's going to be included in the packet of those applicants did we ask specifically about other qualifying experience? Did we ask, did they have an understanding of appropriate relationships with board and superintendent? If that's going to be, if that was a part of the brochure and a part of the packet, but I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if anybody else has that. And maybe it just needs to be worded different, but it should be relative
to the brochure,
to what the brochure is.
But I can add something too, Christy.
Okay.
So I was a person who suggested the board superintendent relationship, whichever one you read out.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't, any of the
Because this is
ones.
just for the stakeholders. And I would think a lot of we've cast a wide net of stakeholders deliberately. And the idea that all of them will have an equivalent idea of what that relationship is supposed to look
Right.
like isn't clear. So I would say, I think this does match what's in the packet, understanding that it's a unique group that's reviewing them.
Yeah, and
I'm fine. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Chris.
That's all right, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to emphasize what Board Member Anderson said about the wide experience that the stakeholder committee has in reviewing them from their own lens, either as parents or as community leaders, so on and so on. I think that was some of the strategy that Richard and Bryce and I talked about originally, of the value of that. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Yeah. This is what I worry about with this type of a rubric. Yeah. And maybe our stakeholders would be fine with it. It basically is to check the box, and that's it. And I want them to look at those applications. I want them to read through them. I want them to take the time that they need. And maybe it does just come down to a check the box. But are you just going to be looking and go, oh, a teacher, check. Oh, this, a check. So I worry just a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm open to, how this has been edited. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure that the people who are coming in and taking the time to do this and read through it, that they feel valued. And maybe it is just to check the box. I don't like this rating system. That's not my favorite. I think that, the 1 through, I felt the same way as what, everyone else has said. So I don't know if this is my favorite rubric, but I'll go with it if that's the one that we all land on.
Okay.
Isn't there a second page?
Yeah.
That is not in this folder, but that we have where, to Christie's point, people will go through and score, and then they can compare their scores to make rankings and write additional comments about their rankings. So I think the rubric is a preliminary tool for people to go through and then compare. And this is like, okay, I'm going to compare it to judging the science fair. The first person I judge is like, you're amazing, 100. By the end, I go back and revise my score because I met a student who like sliced cells in a lab by herself, So I think that this is a first part of it, and that second page, which
And
is
so there
missing from
is
the folder.
another page
Mhm.
to it.
And it was rankings.
Was it in
and
our
comments.
packet from
Yes.
before?
So I think everything you're saying is true, and I also think it's very resolvable by use of
Right.
the additional page.
Okay. Well, let me clean this up, talk with Richard. Bryce and I will do that, incorporate some feedback, and make sure that we get out the full packet to you all. And I'm sorry for the copy error there. Does that work for everybody? Okay, we can do some of this offline.
That's great.
Okay. And I'll make sure to send out that first letter tomorrow morning. Other than that, we can move on to a superintendent report if needed.
I heard the tone of your voice when you said if needed, but I do have one.
Superintendent, I'm so sorry. The other thing that I forgot to mention to you all is picking dates for the interviews. That's something that a couple of board members have requested just based on scheduling with work commitments. You should have, was it in the packet? Okay, just making sure. Can I see? Mine wasn't in there. Thanks. So just looking at it, our timeline has been updated a little bit. We've removed some of the dates that we've already worked through.
Is this from our last meeting?
There should be
A new timeline that you gave us?
There should be a new one.
In this
And where?
folder you just gave us?
Yeah, was it not in there?
No.
No, there's not
Okay.
one in
Now
there.
look at the one from the last meeting.
Okay, let me find
Very
it.
close, just updated a bit.
Okay.
I thought I was losing my mind there for a minute.
Sorry.
I guess I was the only one that got it, sorry.
No. Okay.
All right, so basically what I have here on mine is the Tuesdays that we have available coming up are April 11th, April 18th, which is already a scheduled regular board meeting. The 25th is a regular board meeting with no established agenda yet. The 2nd and the 16th are regularly scheduled board meetings as well. So just kind of reviewing what we had talked about initially, that the first round of interviews should probably take a full day for us, and the second round of interviews should be about a half day for us as well. So we can totally incorporate, a full day of interviews onto the 25th, and that would push us back a little bit, or we can adopt another day in April to make sure that we're getting that first round of interviews done. Calendar. Any thoughts from the board on that?
Okay, so will you just say that one more time? So
Yes.
You're looking for us to look at the 18th? You want us to add the 18th in?
The 18th is already a scheduled meeting that we have.
Oh, yeah, that's, sorry. Oh, I thought you said it would, because we have the 11th and the 25th
Yes.
also.
Yes,
So
we
we
do.
have all three of those
Yes.
already on our,
schedule, except that we haven't allocated the time as a full day for either of those, for any of those dates right there.
So you were saying April 28th, that's when we were going to interview them, is that?
Suggestion?
It was just a suggestion.
25th.
Yeah, the 25th. But I'm also just thinking out loud that we might want to pick another day in April to conduct a full day of interviews, or we could certainly incorporate that on the 11th, as long as we're getting our other business done that we need to on that day.
could we possibly wait until we see how many applications we have?
That's a good idea.
We could do that too, but I know some board members have work commitments if they wanted to get this scheduled, if we could tonight.
Okay.
Are you looking for us to formally schedule it, or just say
Kind of a-
we're all holding the 25th for interviews?
So what work, maybe if we knew what work commitments that are off
So-
the table?
So I'm the one that asked Nate if we could potentially schedule these. Kind of a personal work thing, but I'm also running a search because I'm an office of one right now, and I really need to get some folks in. So it'd be helpful if we had our date so that I can plan that search around that. But I'm open, just hoping to have something penciled in to.
So I'm looking at the old timeline.
Yep.
And so I just want to say, is the May 2nd, May 9th, and May 16th still dates that you're, that
we-
are on the table to talk about?
They definitely are. So May 2nd and 16th are just our regularly
regular
scheduled board
ones
meetings.
already.
I don't believe that we've scheduled the 9th yet. It was just an option and a potential. That would push us back. We'd kind of tentatively talked about making an appointment on the 2nd, but we can totally push that back to the 16th as well if we need to incorporate a second round of interviews early May versus in April.
Okay.
So that we can move on, do you think it's reasonable to ask everyone to look at the 25th and then report back
Yeah.
to you on what makes the most sense? Okay.
So
But the
April 25th is
that's
already.
a board.
No.
is-
Yeah,
They're
it's
just asking
already-
us to make it the
It's
full
a,
day.
yeah, it's a scheduled
Like a
meeting
full
with
day.
no agenda,
Oh, you're wanting us to make it a full day of interviews on the 25th?
if we could,
All right.
if that would work
That's
for
what
you
I
guys.
thought you were
I
saying.
mean, that was the day you were planning on board agenda planning. I have that on my, I was supposed to show
Yes.
up for board agenda planning that day.
Yeah, we would have to
So we would
think about
reschedule that to someplace else. I don't care, that's fine, 25th.
Mohammed, did
okay.
you have something? Oh, okay.
So April 25th would be like the first
First.
interview. Okay. So we're supposed to be looking at that, but then we're also going to need another day for the second interview.
Exactly.
Right.
And again, this would be just a half day for second interviews. Of course, we would have to incorporate enough time to do some discussion in closed session about who we want to move on to second interviews, but.
Could we just not do it all in the same week? I mean, because I'm thinking if we
that's
have
fair.
anybody that
That's
is
fair.
from out of town,
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
then we would want them to stay in town for a second interview.
Right.
So if you had all day the 25th, we could take the 26th off if we want to, and then do second interviews on the 27th or the 26th.
That would work.
The 26th would be better only for parents who have a short day schedule and no school
yeah.
on the 27th and 28th.
Is that are those short days?
Apparently on my calendar, so.
Oh, well, yeah, because Friday is a non-student day.
Yep.
Can you say that again, Ashley? I don't know that I followed.
Just that the 26th would be better for a second interview date if it was parents who had short days on Thursday because Friday's a non-student day.
Okay. So tentatively put 26th as our second interview day.
I
No?
do have a conflict that.
Okay, so then. we
I
need
mean,
to-
depending on our start time. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Would folks feel comfortable about the 27th? Even though of the stipulations that you brought up, Ashley?
I can't
Okay.
attend after 1 PM.
Okay.
Yeah, that's gonna-
And then Friday's a non-student day. Go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I'm also just looking at the calendar that we have in front of us, or at least I have in front of me. Is there any reason why we wouldn't look at the 18th as a potential first round, and then the second round being that 25th date?
I think it would just be
Is that too quick?
scheduling people.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think the 18th would be
Yeah.
fine.
And then that also
Depending-
keeps us in line with maybe potentially the May 2nd announcement.
That works.
That, so
I don't know
April
what-
18th as doing the first round instead.
The
Just
only
throwing it out
challenge
there.
with that is if you have people from out of town, then it's a week later that
That's
you're
fair.
doing the second
That's
interview.
Oh, yeah, that's
but
right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, we,
I don't know if that,
Weekend.
Well, I mean, what if we looked at the 24th and the 25th, Monday and Tuesday? Because then people could come in, you know, on Sunday if they're from out of town, or,
Mohammed just suggested a weekend day as well. I don't know
we
how
did
folks
that
feel
last
about-
time. We
Yeah.
did a weekend.
And if we did do the week of the 18th, we could spread that out a little bit more without the non-student day.
So I have a conflict on the 19th. I wouldn't be able to participate on the 19th. That would be off for me.
And the 18th week does have an asynchronous day. So it seems like there's a lot. I don't know
We're supposed
if
to.
this is the most
We can't because we're supposed to be heading down to
We
St.
have-
George.
Oh, you did say
efficient
share
way
that.
to, so it seems like there's a lot.
Yeah, so it seems
in
like
mix. I don't know if you want to handle it a different way.
We have USBA on the 19th and the 20th. So
But you could look at the 17th and 18th,
we could.
Monday and Tuesday, and do it. I mean, if we get everything back from the, when are they going to be back from the
That's-
stakeholder
and
group?
and walk that through in our minds together. So if board members get all of the applicants' packets on right as soon as we get back from NSBA, the stakeholders are to have their work done on the 10th. So
Okay.
on the 11th is when you'll get the stakeholder information, and then we as a board, you as a board have not yet decided of the however many applicants there are, you actually want to interview. And so you'll probably want to meet to talk about whom you want to come to agreement on whom you want to interview.
Yeah, that's why I thought we were getting ahead of ourselves, because if you look at determine interviewees, you'd already used the 18th as
Well,
the time when we get together.
That can be
Figure that-
changed, but you will need to get together to determine
Yeah.
whom you want to interview. And then you'll need to give them a couple of days to get into town if they are out of town.
So it seems like
So the 24th and the 25th seem to me like
The
the
best
more
dates.
doable, but that's just,
No, that's fair.
I agree.
that's me too.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Mo?
As of right now, yeah.
Okay.
The 24th and the 25th?
Yep, so all day
Monday and
24,
Tuesday.
and then half day on the 25th.
Maybe what we could suggest, according to what Martin just said, that the 11th, whatever business we have to conduct is conducted, but the rest of the time is spent looking at the feedback.
Candidates and all that stuff. Yep, I agree. All right, so let's pencil those in, and we'll have to make this official, being that it's on the study. Parliamentarian, Christina
Well,
Kindle.
The only date you're adding right now
Is the
as a board
24th.
meeting would be the 24th. That would be a full day.
Yep.
And
That's right.
the 25th would be the half day.
That's right.
But we don't need to make that decision right now. We can put that on the agenda to add that
Yeah.
meeting.
On the 11th.
Till the next board meeting.
At
you
the
can do
next
it.
board meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, let's keep those dates
So
in mind.
percolate that around a little bit and then decide.
Perfect.
It's just a first round, correct?
24th, yeah. And
This
then-
first round, possible 25th as a
And the
second.
25th for the second round. Which means you wouldn't be able to go home on the 24th until you decided and invited the people back for the 25th.
I can do that.
All right. Perfect. Well, that handles all the business that we need to take care of there. Superintendent, sorry to interrupt you.
No, just really quickly, today is World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and in honor of that, people all across the world are wearing mismatched socks. I intended to do that, but being the kind of structured person that I am, I don't own mismatched socks, and so I only own one kind of sock, so my socks are matched, but I'm sorry for that. But it's World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and just wanted to give a shout out for that, and
I wear crazy
thank all of our educators and all of our parents and all of our families
Have mismatched.
and all of our communities to be aware of those wonderful, special kids and people. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any board member reports?
I have one.
Board Member Anderson.
So Christy and I are the RDA designees, and we recently discussed amendments to the State Street Community Reinvestment Area. And again, the RDA is the redevelopment agency of the city. They recently voted to increase the total contribution of the district for the State Street project by, I believe it was 58%. Is that correct?
54?
54%. And a letter was sent to the RDA board detailing our strong opposition to this increase. We were concerned it didn't directly impact students, which our B3 policy directs us to prioritize, among other financial factors. Alan did note in the RDA meeting that it's within their rights in the interlocal agreement to increase our contribution because the overall percentage is the same. But I did want to request that our letter of opposition be attached to the minutes so that the public was aware of the ongoing project as well as our stance. I also had some positive news. I wanted to congratulate West Debate, including Lydia, on their 6-day state championship. The IB art students have a show at the Marmalade Branch Library. Anthony Miller from Washington Elementary was recognized by the University of Utah as a Public School Teacher of the Year and will be appreciated at the 2023 commencement. And then there are dozens of students in the district, many from West Wasatch and Ensign, who recently placed at the Utah Science and Engineering Fair this month.
Board Member Jensen.
Well, that was going to be part of my report.
Yeah.
Utah Science and Engineering Fair. I was fortunate enough to be a judge and was there, well, all day on Wednesday. That was the elementary schools, and it was really wonderful to see how many of our elementary schools were there. And several of those children placed. They had, second place, but they're, so I don't want to name individual names, but Emerson was there, Ensign was there, Highland Park was there, Indian Hills was there, Whittier was there, Uinta was there, Wasatch, Ensign. I mean, it was really a wonderful cross-section of our district, and it was delightful to be able to be a judge to some of those students and see how engaged they were. I had a wonderful day with them. And then the second part of my report would be, okay, we approved the minutes from the two previous meetings, and in the March 7th meeting, that was where we looked with Dr. Buendia at the Strategic Student Achievement Plan. And in that, and in the minutes, it reflects that this is a living document. And we were looking at the glossary and then definitions of those terms of art. And then we also talked about the 39 bullet points, which that seemed like a lot of goals. I remember that Board Member Sweat expressed some concern about that. So I was just thinking that it would be, because in that discussion, and I just wanted that reflected, that we would be hearing back on those so that we, at some point, determine, okay, are we going to maybe have a bi-monthly update on this or a quarterly update on where we are with the Strategic Student Achievement Plan? Because if it's a living document, these things, as they come up, need to be looked at.
And we may, if I may respond real quick, the strategic plan is now online. It's been published in Spanish and English, and I have incorporated and addressed some of the issues that came up.
Okay.
And I would agree that we do need to, just like we need to at some point decide how we're going to go about this, selecting the steering committee and so I'm happy to come back and report on a regular basis.
Well, I just think that helps us meet some of one of our responsibilities as a board.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Board Member Sweat, do you have a report?
I think that those are really thoughtful ideas, and I know that when we talked about that, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that with it being an important part of the things that we do here and direct the resources, for me, I think that Alan already told us that he would be coming back to us and connecting all those dots. There was a time when we used to, on a quarterly basis, have a student achievement plan report. And I think that if we move towards doing something like that, it keeps us updated. It helps Sandra, be able to know where we're at also, but also to provide information to us. Not only what's happening with the student achievement plan, but fiscally, what's happening with it. It was really beneficial for me to have those people who own those pillars to come in and talk about, well, this is what we're going to need for resources in order for us to achieve that plan. And then Alan would say, no, you can't have that money. So I just think that that is a really thoughtful idea, is to look at maybe going back towards, some sort of a annual, or let's say quarterly report.
To Board Member Sweat and Board Member Jensen, and Bryce and I will work on getting those added to agendas at the appropriate times.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Board Member Bade?
Well, it's that fun time for Muslims. It is Ramadan, so it should be either tomorrow, could be the first or day after. So it'll all depend when the moon decides to show up. So, and as you all know, so it is a 30-day fasting and not straight from sunrise to sunset. So it's shorter days, which is good. Sorry, guys. Yeah, it's good to have short days. And so please don't forget to wish happy Ramadan to your colleagues and to post it in the social media. It is really such an important month in the lives of Muslims. It is a month where you actually, sit back and contemplate and think of people who do not have food 24/7 and they can only eat one meal a day, So there are so many things, that are so important, and I treasure personally in that month. And also it is, a month of kindness. So you will notice if there are some Muslims out there that usually swears, you're not going to hear them swearing in Ramadan. I will try not to. I shall not guarantee that, but I'll try. Basically what I'm saying is I just want to wish happy Ramadan to all the 2 billion plus Muslims across the globe. And to our Muslim community in our district, I want to wish you as well happy Ramadan and Ramadan Kareem wa kullu aam wa antum bi khair.
Thank you, Board Member Bade. Okay. Student Board Member May, do you have anything? Okay. One, just thank you, Board, for the meeting tonight. Just so the community knows that we will be in Orlando at the National School Board Association at the end of the month for 3 days at the conference. I know Christy Sweat has a really, really important opportunity to share, if you'd like, what you're going to be venturing on throughout this next year in your new role and responsibility with NSBA as the new president of NSBA. So we're really looking forward to joining you for that monumentous occasion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's it. I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
This flyer, I'll send it to you and to...
Good, and I'll get it to Andre.
Yeah, you'll be so great, I got this one here. There is one that I have my name on it,